If your job or your company's success relies on custom software development, you're going to want to watch this. Hi, I'm Kevin Goldberg, CEO and founder of Imagistic IS2 Digital. We build custom software solutions for businesses like yours to enhance profitability, streamline operations, and strengthen your brand online. So let me set the stage. Today, we're going to talk about a very important topic, which is how to vet a software development company. But I'm not going to tell you to check their technical skills or check the references or anything like that. Of course, those are important, but that's not enough. If you want average results, follow the average checklists. But if you want excellence, you need to go deeper. So today I'm going to pull back the curtain on 5 overlooked but critical areas for you to focus on. These are insider tips that will empower you to find the best software development company for your business. So let's get started. Assessment area 1, engagement process. The engagement process tells you almost everything you need to know about how your experience with each company will proceed. For example, do they start off with a consulting arrangement or go into a discovery process? If they immediately start giving you quotes, you need to run. This is not a company that has their I's dotted and their T's crossed. A solid engagement process includes a well-defined discovery phase, scope document, clear estimates, onboarding, and optional long-term support. Ask them to walk you through how they gather requirements and what the process is for generating the scope document. Also ask them to explain what they do when there's scope creep or out-of-scope requests. If their answers are vague, inconsistent, or they don't have a well-defined process, that's a problem. A company's ability to plan, guide, and communicate before writing a single line of code is critical to the foundation of success. Assessment area 2, internal workflow. Some people skip this part, but it's important to ask what project methodology the company uses. Is it Agile, Kanban, Scrum, Waterfall? Perhaps they use a hybrid approach, or maybe it depends on the project or the phase of the project. All of these have their place. What's important is to listen to their answer and why they use a particular approach and how that would apply to your project. And with this, ask about project meetings. What types of meetings do they have? How frequently do they occur? Which ones are you included in? And what are the purposes of the meetings? These rituals are critical in keeping your project on track and moving it towards success. Also ask what types of project management tools they use: Jira, ClickUp, Trello, or even some homegrown system. The specifics actually don't matter. What does matter is that there is a tool in place that's well established within their process. And finally, ask them to explain their internal workflow, from task creation and assignment all the way through to project delivery. How does code move from development to QA to delivery? How do they deal with blockers? How do they deal with scope changes? And how do they deal with both internal and external communication? The best teams are predictable, collaborative, and transparent. If you hear, for project management, we're pretty casual, or we keep project management light to keep overhead and budget lower, that's a red flag. You want systems and structure. You don't want chaos and casual. Assessment area 3, coding and development. So you don't actually need to be a developer to make this assessment. There are a few easy guidelines, which I'll go over now. First, the development team must use a version control system. In my opinion, this is a deal breaker. For example, I've seen inexperienced WordPress development teams avoid using a version control system because you can make code changes directly through the WordPress admin. Now, it's true that that is efficient and effective. However, it's a terrible practice. It's terrible because when a code change is made, there's no record of who made it or why they made it. And if there's a problem, there's no way to revert the last code change that was made. So it creates a terrible mess. And if the development team you're considering uses this practice, I recommend that you get rid of them immediately. Once you know they use a version control system, ask them to share a sample commit history with you and take the time to read through the descriptions. A commit history is a list of code additions and changes made essentially in a sequential order. And each commit has a description. So as you're reading through it, ask yourself, is the description clear? Is it informative? And you, even as a non-developer, should be able to understand what was done, and why that change was done. Sloppy and/or inconsistent commit descriptions imply a less structured development process and will typically lead to confusion, bugs, and wasted time in the long run. Finally, ask if they do code reviews, peer or lead, and ask if they have continuous integration or continuous deployment in place. Again, you don't need to understand the answers to these questions. What you're looking for is that they have a system in place and that they can explain why they have the systems. If the company is disorganized or protective about any of these systems or processes, that typically implies that they have a less mature development process in place. Assessment area 4, documentation. Clean code helps, but it's not enough. Documentation is the foundation of making a software system maintainable, scalable, and transferable. This is especially important if you plan someday on bringing development in-house. In addition to a user manual, other types of documentation include architectural diagrams, deployment instructions, and a list of API endpoints. You should ask for samples of documents that may be applicable for your project. As well, if you haven't already reviewed the commit history from the version control system, ask for a sample now. This is a critical form of documentation that should be easy to read even as a non-developer. And if you're at least a little familiar with programming, ask to look at the code. Look for consistency in naming conventions and clear and easy to read comments. These documentation practices are critical in the maintenance of the application and in future enhancements as eventually new developers will be brought in over time. At least some type of documentation should be included in scope in your project. And if you ever switch vendors or bring development in-house, you'll be glad it exists. Moreover, companies who document well are typically quite thorough, and this is a great marker for excellence. Assessment 5, quality assurance and testing. Don't just ask if they do quality assurance, QA, ask how. Great teams have a formal QA process in place, and they'll be happy to share that with you. They'll walk you through how they do bug tracking and resolution, what tools they use, and most importantly, what the process is moving tickets through their system. As well, depending on the software being built, the team may want to write unit tests, or integration tests, or end-to-end tests, or even automations. These should all be discussed as part of the scope process so that you're part of deciding how your budget is being spent. In addition to the company doing QA, you and your team are also a critical part of the testing process, and you need to make sure to plan for it. This is sometimes overlooked as a responsibility of the client. That said, the company should bring it up without you mentioning it. They should include your QA time in their schedule and offer you access to their ticketing system or a Google Sheet or whatever you'd prefer to track your issues. As well, they should identify the more complex parts of the application which you should pay greater attention to in your user acceptance testing process, UAT. This will help to ensure you end up with a well-built and high-functioning software application. Software has bugs, period. But a development team with a solid QA process will minimize critical bugs and be able to deliver real value for your company. So let me get to the point. When you're looking for a custom software development company, it's not enough to just check references, technical skills, and look at past work. You need to dig deeper. The best companies have strong internal processes, disciplined code management, clear documentation, and a commitment to quality. These behind-the-scenes factors are what separate good from excellent. At IS2 Digital, we embody these more nuanced processes. Our clients don't just get working software, they get precision, quality, and long-term value. So if that's what you're looking for, let's talk. IS2 Digital helps business executives solve problems with software. If we can help improve or automate any of the behind-the-scenes processes that run your business, reach out and let's see if we can help. is2digital.com/to-the-point. Also, remember to subscribe if this information has been helpful and you'd like to be alerted when we release new content.